Hi, it's Crazymonkey back again. So as you can see, it's just a beautiful day today. It's up at it's in the mid upper 70s up here in the mountains. There's Ogden down below, and we're just walking back. So I'm gonna do part two of the first part was I was talking about the moon landing that happened 50 years ago. I was talking about how 50 years ago, July 20th, 1969, Armstrong landed on the moon, and he gave his famous speech, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." And I said in the previous blog, I think that was America's zenith moment. That was like when our country was at the peak. Our country was at the top. I think that was our zenith moment, and I think things have gone downhill since. And then I was explaining how things have gone downhill, and now you got house prices that are astronomical. The middle class are collapsing. These foreign elites are just buying up so many of our houses. And a lot of these foreign elites, they get their money in very nasty ways, off treating people terrible in slave factories where they work them 60, 70-hour weeks. And the labor conditions are just horrendous. And you got these filthy rich foreign elites that are making money in really, really nasty ways. And then they get to come here, or they go to Australia or Canada or Europe, and they just buy up so many houses. And then the middle class can't afford houses because these filthy rich foreign elites are driving up the prices. So I was talking about that. Techies, government workers, and the big government, as we're getting more and more socialist, as taxes are higher and higher, and as socialism gets worse and worse. A lot of these government workers are making just massive, obscene amounts of money, and then that also drives up the house prices astronomically in places all over the world. So I was talking about that as well. And now I want to talk about how the wages have collapsed. And I want to talk about how the techies are leading the way to collapsing the wages. You look at the gig economy. You look at the whole gig economy. Something over here. I'm not sure if it's a snake or a lizard. Probably a lizard. All right, so you look at the whole gig economy. You look at the whole gig economy, folks. And it's just absolutely horrendous, man. It is just freaking horrendous. You look at these ride-sharing apps. These drivers, man, they're making like $9, $10 an hour, and they get no health care. They're just working like slaves for like $9, $10 an hour. Their vehicles are getting trashed. Their vehicles are getting wrecked because they're putting like 50,000 miles on their vehicle every year. So within like 2-3 years, their vehicles are basically wasted. And these people are only making $9, $10 an hour. It's just, the whole gig economy is just total exploitation. You're basically labeled a contract worker, so you don't get any protections. You don't get minimum wage protections. You don't get any health care. I don't even think you get workers' compensation. You get like virtually nothing. It's just horrendous. And then these ride-sharing apps, they set the amount of money that you make. And it usually amounts to like $9 or $10 an hour after expenses. After you pay your expenses, it usually amounts to like $9 or $10 an hour. That's what people are averaging from the research I've done online. It's just disgusting. It's just utterly disgusting. You look at all these gig jobs. These gig jobs are so horrendous. And these techies in San Francisco, it's just an absolutely beautiful day. These techies are making billions in San Francisco. The stock prices are billions for these tech companies. These tech companies based in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, they're making billions and billions. Their stock price is billions and billions. The CEOs are like billionaires. They're just getting all this money, and these workers in the gig economy. And that, with tech, basically, you have two types of workers. You have one, the techies that are doing the computer programming, that are basically doing the software, that are basically doing that aspect of it, and they're usually based in San Francisco, San Jose, and they make like $200,000 salaries, and they get like $1 million in stock options. But the thing is, they also have to pay $2 million for a house, so they're not really well off. They're not that well off because the house just eats them up. So all that money they make, the house just eats it all up, and then they still live in poverty, basically. So their life ain't that great. All right? But the gig workers are the real slaves, folks. The gig workers, the ones doing the ride-sharing apps where they're driving their car, or the people doing it's meal delivery now, where people are driving their car doing meal delivery, or people are doing dog walking. There's a whole bunch of these gig type opportunities, these gig jobs, and pretty much every one of them set up the same way. After you pay your expenses for your car, gasoline, everything, you rarely make more than like $9 or $10 an hour. They're all like these ultra low shitty jobs, and then there's no benefits. You don't get health care. I don't believe, because you're labeled independent contractor, I don't believe you get workers' compensation. I mean, it's just a new form of slavery, basically. So all the techies have really done with the gig economy is they just reinvented slavery. I mean, they're just bringing back like the robber baron days of like 100, 150 years ago, when workers had no rights and they were working like 70, 80-hour weeks, getting hurt. The boss just fires them once they get severely injured. You know, they had no rights. And if you look at the gig economy, it's very much the same way. I mean, you're going to work 60, 70 hours a week in the gig economy just to pay your rent in, say, LA, because the rents are so high. You're going to be making like $9, $10 an hour doing these gig jobs. There's no minimum wage protections because you're labeled independent contractor. And then at the same time, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like if you're doing these gig jobs and you're labeled independent contractor, I believe if you get injured, like let's say a drunk driver hits your vehicle, you're in your vehicle and they hit you, the drunk driver hits you and you get serious injuries, I believe you're on the hook for that. I believe you have to pay for that. I don't think the gig companies compensate you. I'm pretty sure, because you're labeled independent contractor, that you basically have to pay for the hospital bills. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So I mean, they just reinvented slavery, basically. And like, who would have guessed 50 years ago, who would have guessed 50 years ago when Armstrong landed on the moon, exactly 50 years ago, who would have guessed that our country would be like it is today? They were predicting there would be monorails, there would be space bases on the moon, colonies on Mars, and orbital hotels in outer space where even the middle-class people like us could pay money to get on a space plane, go to outer space, and go to the space hotel. That's what they were predicting. They were predicting like everybody was going to have this great life, taking monorails back and forth to work. These are the predictions they were making back in 1969, and none of it happened. Instead, it's like worse now than it was then in many, many ways. The wages of the jobs, adjusted to inflation, it's like much worse today than it was then. Back then, it was easy to be middle class. Now it's like very difficult, as they're gutting the middle class. Back then, house prices were affordable pretty much everywhere you went. Even big cities like New York, San Francisco, house prices were affordable. Now, in most of the big cities, houses are a luxury for the rich people only. The average house in many big cities now over $1 million. And, you look at the wages the workers are making, it's just absolutely horrendous. Like I said, these gig workers only making like $9, $10 an hour. But the prices are astronomical. Back in 1969, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like the average wage back then, I think it was like 10 or 15,000, but I could be wrong, but like I know in 1950s, they said houses were 10 grand to 15 grand, and the average guy made like 5,000 a year. I believe that was 1950s. In the 1960s, it was continually good, so it probably went up. I'm guessing the houses in the 1960s, 1969, the houses would have been like 30,000, and I'm imagining the average wage was like 10,000, you know what I'm saying, or 15,000, something along those lines. And today, you look at these gig workers, man, they're only making like $9 an hour. That's only 18,000 a year, folks. That's only 18,000 a year. These gig economy workers driving their vehicle, doing these dangerous driving jobs where they could get seriously injured, they could get hit by a drunk driver, they could get killed in a car crash. They're doing very dangerous jobs. And like I said, they're making very little money. 18,000, which is like virtually nothing.